Hello, this is D, and I'm back with another video, and today we have our fifth and final day of the FTC versus Microsoft hearing. Microsoft CFO Amy Hood and Nintendo's Steve Singer via a video deposition. And I'm expecting the FTC to throw everything at the wall today, hoping that they'll find something that will stick. Now, if you guys have been following the trial, you know that things have not been going well for the FTC. Now, first off is Microsoft CFO Amy Hood, and she is not taking the stand. Now, the FTC has decided not to question Amy Hood. Now, Microsoft has already submitted a written declaration of Hood where she says Microsoft wants to increase Xbox operation margins to match other Microsoft businesses. She also says that Microsoft never assessed removing Call of Duty from PlayStation and that the Activision deal has to immediately make money. Now, like usual, I'll leave a link in the description down below. We are covering Tom Warren's coverage over at The Verge today. Now, I expect today to be a lot of testimony. I don't think this video is going to be short. None of the videos that we've been doing recently have been short, and I don't think that this video is going to be any exception. Now, we're hearing that the CMA has tried to push back the Microsoft UK appeal date, and they were rejected. Now, they filed it this morning, or I believe sometime this week, and it was denied. They will have to respond to Microsoft on the 28th of July in the tribunal. Now, the CMA is trying hard to delay this case because they know that Microsoft has a closing date. And I don't think it's really going to matter because the preliminary injunction, we need this not to be applied to this so that they can close the deal. And I think that they're going to close the deal as soon as possible, and they'll worry about the CMA at a later date. Project Denali. We've seen references to Project Denali in the exhibits list, and now the FTC begins to question Tim Stewart, Xbox CFO, who confirms Project Denali is a codename for Activision Blizzard deal. The FTC continues to question Stewart around whether his team has done any financial analysis on the Sony agreement for Call of Duty or Nintendo and Nvidia and plus other cloud deals. Now, Stewart confirms they have not done financial analysis on the efforts of this deal. Xbox console market share time. The FTC is questioning Tim Stewart about the console market share from April 2022. A confidential document share includes Nintendo Switch and Xbox One, PS4 consoles. It also measures just the US alone. Tim Stewart is asked about the Japanese market as the data doesn't include those markets. The data is not that reliable for other markets, argues Stewart. So apparently we won't get to hear from Nintendo today. Steve Singer, SVP and Developer Relations of Nintendo, is appearing in court by video deposition. As the video contains lots of confidential information, Judge Corley will review it in a closed court. Now, I was listening to this in real time, and I was wondering what's happening. I don't hear anything. So I guess they reviewed all this in the closed court. We're not going to be able to see what he said. Now, this whole hearing, the FTC has been arguing that Nintendo is not relevant in the console space and that Sony and Microsoft don't view them as a competitor. The FTC is trying hard to push this narrative because it points to Call of Duty not being on a Nintendo Switch, or even if it is, it not being relevant. And we all know that's not the case. The Nintendo Switch is a competitor. They are in the console space, and Call of Duty on the Switch would be good for consumers. Now, dump trucks of money. The FTC is bringing up the phrase dump trucks of money as it's questioning Tim Stewart and Microsoft spending lots of money on gaming content. Now, the FTC asked, have you ever heard the amount of money that's been spent? Like you've said, dump trucks of money? Stewart said, I have a friend of work that likes to say dump trucks of money. I referred to him. Xbox Game Pass pricing versus Sony. Now, we're talking about the pricing of the subscriptions. The FTC references a March email between Tim Stewart, Xbox CFO, and Amy Hood. The email discusses Sony subscription pricing, a Game Pass competitor after its announcement last year. The email also includes a table of information and Stewart comparing Game Pass and Sony subscription. It's not clear exactly what the figures are without seeing the table, but Stewart apparently says day-and-date games are a key difference for Game Pass. We're now hearing about September 16th, 2020 email between Tim Stewart, Amy Hood, Phil Spencer, Satya Nadella, and Jarrett West, CMO at Xbox. Stewart is updating the team about how Xbox Series S pricing compares to the PS5 on the day of Sony's pricing announcement. The information the FTC is pointing out in the email is redacted, so it's not clear what pricing was discussed. Another email 2 years later in 2022 is referenced where Spencer is updating the team about pricing moves from Sony. Stewart was discussing foreign exchange rates and probably discussing a price hike, which Microsoft eventually announced last week. So we heard last week that Microsoft announced a price increase on the Xbox Series X console. Now, Game Pass had a small increase of $1 a month. I think it works out to like $13, maybe $15 a year at the most. I don't think that's a huge price increase, especially for the value that you get in Game Pass. I think Microsoft got the price hike out of the way so they wouldn't have to worry about it coming up in these regulatory meetings and, of course, at this hearing. Now they're going through the financial models for Bethesda and Activision Blizzard, and the FTC and Tim Stewart are now discussing the financial models for Bethesda acquisition and Activision Blizzard. For both, Tim Stewart assumes no major changes in platform strategy. The model for Bethesda Games deals assumes that there would be non-Xbox platform revenue, and the FTC lawyer then says Activision required a financial revision, but Stewart doesn't remember. The FTC brings up an updated forecast from Activision in January 2022, arguing it's not a small revision. Not clear what triggered the update forecast, but perhaps a game cancellation or delay. Stewart says it's relatively small in the grand scheme of a 10-year model. Bethesda content first, better, or best on Xbox. Now the FTC is talking about Jeffrey's investment meeting in November 2020, where Tim Stewart talks about not pulling Bethesda games, but the FTC reads what was said. We want the content in the long run to either be first, better, or best. Pick your experience on our platform, make it special. We will want Bethesda content to show up the best on our platforms. The FTC wants Stewart to explain first, better, and best. He says first could be like Starfield. The FTC says better could mean better resolution. Resolution is one thing, frame rate one thing. I was being pretty vague. Stewart argues that showing up in Game Pass could be a better experience, but Stewart also previously said that better could be showing up in resolution. He also said, I suspect you'll continue to see us push for a first, better, or best approach on our platforms. The question clearly leans into the FTC and Sony concerns Call of Duty would be degraded on the PlayStation or that the games could be held back from a competitor platform. Now, as we all know, the Xbox Series X has different features in the PlayStation 5, as the PlayStation 5 utilizes different features than the Xbox Series X. I really feel this is a much about nothing here. The FTC is really grasping at straws. Now, if the Xbox Series X is able to achieve a higher resolution or a better frame rate, that has nothing to do with the PlayStation. It has nothing to do with gimping those games. And once again, this is the FTC not doing their homework, not knowing how the console market works, not knowing how games work, the basic stuff. And it's really starting to show, and I'm being honest with you guys, I'm getting really annoyed with the FTC's attempts. Wish we could come out and say we're taking it all exclusive. Now, the FTC has just presented an email between Xbox CFO Tim Stewart and Xbox chief Phil Spencer, where Spencer says Stewart's investor talk about Bethesda sure did stir up a lot of stuff. Wish we could come out and say we're talking Bethesda content all exclusive at this point. Spencer responds, we can't say that. So this is Phil Spencer telling him that we can't say that, we can't make all of these games exclusive, and we can't say that we're going to make all of these games exclusive. And I don't understand what the big deal is, because Sony makes all of their content exclusive. All of the studios that they own outside of Bungie, they make their games only available on the PlayStation platform. We've heard Satya Nadella go on stand and say that I don't like exclusives, but we're in a market where exclusives matter, and Sony is the leader, and they've dictated that exclusives are a thing, so we have to compete. Now, with the judge knowing all of this information, I don't understand what the FTC is trying to do here. You're trying to say that exclusives are bad? Because if you're trying to say that exclusives are bad, then you need to look at Sony, because they have the most exclusives. Now, in another email between Stewart and Matt Booty, Xbox Game Studio chief, he discusses making Bethesda games exclusives and the financial trade-offs and concerns about the valuation. The email mentions Xbox Game Pass subscriber growth, Xbox units, and offsetting these against the losses of taking games exclusive. The FTC wants to make clear that Microsoft would be willing to take the financial hit to boost Xbox Game Pass subscription growth, sell more consoles, and ultimately bring more consumers to its Xbox platform. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but when they made that acquisition, they said that it would be on a game per game basis. So obviously they're going to have to do an analysis to see what games make sense to keep multi-platform and what games will give Xbox or Game Pass an advantage. Now, Call of Duty is not one of these games. We've seen the financials already. We know how much money this game makes, and there is nothing that Microsoft could do to offset the cost of taking it off of the PlayStation. And this is very clear, and I don't think the judge is a fool. She's very smart, and she can see through this. So once again, I don't understand what the FTC is getting at. Microsoft has 5 scenarios to pick for Bethesda games. Xbox CFO Tim Stewart is now discussing 5 strategy scenarios that Microsoft was weighing up for Bethesda in February 2021. just ahead of the deal closing. They range from a number 1 being fully cross-platform, a number 5 being fully Xbox exclusive. Full exclusivity would impact the deal valuation, and when discussing these options, Jarrett West, Xbox CMO, said there would be a significant upset to fully exclusivity, and there's an admission that some leaders at Bethesda won't be happy seeing games cut from the PlayStation. The FTC is clearly trying to show that Microsoft deal models are flexible, where they can potentially offset losses. But once again, Sony has been offered a contract to guarantee that Call of Duty will not be removed off of the PlayStation. Phil Spencer in court, under oath, has said that he is not going to remove it from the PlayStation, that the only thing stopping it from going on that console right now is Sony and them signing the agreement. And without an agreement, they would still put it on the PlayStation. You have Satya Nadella going on stand and saying that 100% to continue bringing Call of Duty to the PlayStation. Now, this is what we've been waiting for. Things are getting spicy. The FTC's case is unraveling before our eyes. They have no evidence. Their numbers are made up. They look really foolish. His confidence is leaving him. You can hear it by the tone of his voice and the answers that he gives back to the judge. He just doesn't know what to say. Now, Judge Corley wants to know more about the basics, whether Dr. Lee's report was based on telemetry real data of how people play Call of Duty. My question is about this foreclosure model, because that's important to Microsoft. Having the incentive, that's a mathematical incentive, that's the num of it. A lot of people buy games and they play them once or twice and they never play them again. I guess I'm trying to figure that out. I'm looking at the data that Dr. Bailey said, and a lot of people buy it and don't play it very much. Is that what Dr. Lee is seeing based on the number of hours played? Now, the FTC is referencing confidential data and struggling to answer the question clearly. Now, Microsoft's lawyer cuts in and says the company asked Dr. Lee about his calculations. We don't have the answers, said Microsoft's lawyer, because the numbers are made up. And the judge is really starting to expose the FTC's case. Now, she asked, why isn't the PC an alternative to the Xbox? Judge Corley wants to know about the consumer's choice because they can play a lot of Xbox Series X games on the PC. Judge Corley asked, what if they have a PC? Why isn't everybody, particularly in 2023, likely to own a PC? So they don't have to buy one. Now, the FTC answers the gaming PC is a special kind of PC. It's a run-of-the-mill PC. Now, the judge makes a very valid point here. Most people have a capable PC that has like a 3060, something basic in it that can play games. We know that you can use the low settings and you can play a lot of these games at 720p resolution. We have an Asus ROG Ally that is playing games that is not as powerful as, the Xbox Series X, for example, or your regular PC. So she makes a very valid point. Now, the judge goes on to say, maybe I'm biased in the world that I'm living in. During the pandemic, nobody did it on a bargain basement PC. Everybody had a $1,000 or $1,500 PC. The judge continued, why wouldn't being able to play on the PC have a downward pressure on the Xbox if you raise a console to $1,000? For any given market where they assume the price increases fast, then almost anything becomes a substitute. And that was FTC's answer, and that was really weak. Now, the FTC says it has no evidence that Microsoft is benchmarking the PC against Xbox, and the FTC could easily explain this to Judge Corley that a gaming PC requires a dedicated GPU to play Call of Duty, significantly increasing the price and complexity compared to the PC people typically have at the home or may have purchased during the pandemic. So that's a good point, and that was a missed opportunity, but you also have some PCs where you don't need a dedicated GPU to run some of these games. So I don't know if it really would have made a difference anyways. Now, he goes on to say that the FTC could also argue easily and cite data that shows the vast majority of PC sales are laptops which don't have the ability to play games like Call of Duty. Once again, I don't think that'd be a valuable argument, to be honest with you, because I have a laptop and it can play Call of Duty. And it's not the top of the line laptop. It just has a 3070 in it. You can play Call of Duty, so I disagree with this comment here. Anyways, we're going back up here and they're switching back to the Nintendo Switch again. And I don't even want to talk about this, but I guess it's relevant because these closing arguments, there's a lot said. So I think today's video runtime is going to be long because I'm looking at what I have to read still. And there's a lot of stuff coming up and it gets really spicy. And the one thing that I can promise you at the end, the FTC is going to look like a fool. I really feel that they were humiliated today. And the judge was trying hard to see the points that the FTC was trying to make. She gave them many opportunities to present evidence. and to convince her. And by the end of the day, they didn't produce those results. Anyways, Judge Corley asked, why is the Xbox Series S priced at $299? The FTC says that Xbox CFTO Tim Stewart and the evidence where Microsoft Xbox Series S strategy was to price was to get an entry-level Gen 9 system. Now, when they're pricing it at launch, they didn't say let's try and triangulate with the Switch. Even if you honor there is some substitution on the Xbox Series S, we don't think it's enough to defeat the market we put forward. Microsoft lawyer cuts in and says that Judge Corley gets it, and that a $299 price shows they compete when a consumer is making a choice in the store like Best Buy. The FTC argues that you can play video games on your phone and you can play a video game on your console, but they're very different. The FTC once again says that Microsoft didn't look at the Switch pricing during launch. Now, they also point out that a lot of games play on the Switch as well as the Series S. Minecraft was mentioned as well as FIFA, and we know there's a host of other games that are cross-platform. I think they were making a point that a lot of single-player, or I should say free-to-play games are available on both systems, and of course there's some multi-plats that do have some overlap on both of them. So once again, it's ineffective, and this is the judge asking these questions. And the FTC is not doing a good job convincing her on their points. And I really have to point that out here. Okay, we're going to have to skim over just a little bit of this. Let's go where she says all this trouble about a shooter. Judge Corley is still focused on Call of Duty. All of this for a shooter video game, for this one game. The FTC, I completely understand where you're coming from. On the other hand, our responsibility over the side of the room and the government is not to make a value judgment about the market. It's to protect the competition in the market. Judge Corley, it's a game, but people that care so much, they would actually switch to Xbox they wouldn't otherwise? It's not about just switching, says the FTC. The harm of the PlayStation person who has Call of Duty is when they wake up after this deal closes and some new character is only on Xbox. It's not that the person is going to switch, it's that that person's experience as the value they paid for has been degraded in some way. Judge Corley then asked what the FTC says to PlayStation chief Jim Ryan, saying there's nothing anti-competitive to making Starfield exclusive. The FTC doesn't know the basis of why Ryan was upset because he does the same thing, and that was said by Judge Corley. So she points out that Sony does the same thing, that they're accusing Microsoft of doing in the future. We're finding out now that this is a practice in the console space, that they all have to compete, and one way of them doing that is to have exclusives on their platform that shows a difference between all the other console providers. It's not the harm to Sony, it's the harm to consumers. And right here, this is where I know that the FTC is not winning. Now, he goes on to say that the FTC is to argue their case here, and it's mainly been a single Microsoft lawyer arguing against the numbers of the FTC lawyers. Both sides have now moved on to legal arguments, citing previous cases. Microsoft argues that it's all about Call of Duty at the core of Microsoft deals completely address the concerns. Microsoft lawyer points to the latest Final Fantasy and how Microsoft just lost part of that game, or Minecraft where Sony held back the dev kits. If they can't figure out what the harm is, so they're turning it to you or us and saying you should figure it out because it's too hard for us. Microsoft lawyer argues that the game exclusives aren't happening all the time. No witness said there was going to be a partial foreclosure. No one said that. Not one example of it. And if it's a partial exclusivity, as you said, and Mr. Nadalia said, I thought the best, that's the world we live in because Sony's the market leader. Clue into that. Sony is the market leader. And that's what they do. If that's what they want to call partial foreclosure, that's happening all the time. These partial exclusivities, timed exclusive contracts, these are part of competition. It is not a part of anti-competitive behavior. Now, the FTC points to evidence of Jim Ryan's testimony about partial foreclosure, that it harms, for example, to Sony in terms of optimization. But Judge Corley wants to know where the harm is. It's not the harm to Sony, it's the harm to consumers. And that is crazy. And then they went on a break. She said it's not about Sony, it's about the consumers. And this whole hearing, the FTC has just been mostly arguing how this is going to affect Sony and their platform. It's never been about the consumers. These guys out here, I don't know, man, they're reckless. They really should have did their due diligence so they wouldn't have found themselves in this ridiculous position. And I kind of feel bad for this lawyer now. I'm going to be honest with you. Because his leader sent him out here to get slaughtered, to be a sacrificial lamb. Just to say that the FTC stands up to big business. That's fine. You can show that, but it has to be a legit case. And this clearly is not. And the judge is not seeing it. And the judge is kind of annoyed. Now, as we came back from the break, the FTC actually replied to what the judge said before the break. And he said, we're not here to protect Sony. We're here to protect the consumers. And honestly, a little bit too late for that, because all of the evidence that you've been saying and just your actions speak louder than words. It's quite clear that you're protecting Sony, because Call of Duty can be available to Sony on their platform. In fact, it's still available right now. They said they'll do it with or without a contract. And the judge kind of points that out a little bit later on. But nonetheless, they can have it. So the judge isn't stupid, but she wanted to move on from this. And I'll be honest with you guys, the FTC, they couldn't prove their case. They couldn't prove their point on where that extra 20% was coming from. They couldn't answer the judge's questions sufficiently. I really feel so. And it's just not looking good for the FTC. Now, she moved on to the subscriptions and the cloud. Now, the FTC said the next big thing is multi-game subscriptions and the cloud. And we've seen Microsoft documents and their emphasis on the cloud subscriptions. Game Pass is a strategic driver for Microsoft's gaming business. The effect of this transaction to turbocharge Game Pass leaves Google, Amazon in the dust, and build a content moat around Game Pass is in the record and compelling. There is concern that you take this content and use it in advance on your own platforms, and the consumer is harmed. Okay, honestly, I can't even go through it anymore. It's just idiotic. It really is. Now, Microsoft responds to FTC's cloud concerns. Now, Microsoft's lawyer went on to say, with all these other streaming services, they're all going to have the ability to stream the game, which they don't have today. Judge Corley says to the FTC, in some sense, you won. You got what you wanted. You forced them to enter these agreements. Now, the FTC replied, we have evidence that there are agreements. We don't have evidence of anything beyond those agreements. Judge Corley said, why would NVIDIA do what they did? Say what they said. They're a competitor to Microsoft in cloud gaming, so why did they do it then? The FTC says it doesn't count under the law because it's not a merger specific. The deal could have been achieved whether we were here or not. It was a sweetener. And they go on to say that Microsoft offered them this and offered them that. Microsoft lawyer jumped in and said, it doesn't matter what we offered them. We got the deal done. The deal is done. They agreed to the terms, which is true. So what are they trying to argue here? More people are going to be able to play Call of Duty now. More people are going to have access to these Activision games via NVIDIA's cloud. That's a whole different segment of the market. It's got nothing to do with Xbox. That's good for consumers. The FTC has to prove that it's bad for consumers, and they're not doing that with these arguments. There's no evidence that they're presenting that says that. They're telling you that Jim Ryan told them so. So this is how it is. It's ridiculous. Now, Microsoft's lawyers, they were getting annoyed here, and they're basically saying that the FTC's claims are absurd. Now, the question is, what is the output of these agreements? There's no dispute that Call of Duty is going to be in the cloud services if the transaction goes through. So you asked, and I've asked every one of our executives whether they would honor these contracts. They said it in open court. They said it under oath. They said it for the last year, to be honest. Are they really honestly suggesting that they weren't credible? They're going to get up in a public courtroom in front of you and lie about whether they would honor those contracts? I mean, it's absolutely absurd. Really, it is to suggest that Satya Nadella got up in the courtroom and said he would honor it. In fact, he doesn't even like exclusives, and he would like the content to be everywhere, and he said that. Now, the FTC argues that Microsoft is setting the terms of marketing competition on their own, and Microsoft has no deals with Google or Amazon. And they went deeper into that. They were saying that Microsoft is picking the winners and the losers. So they said that NVIDIA and all these other companies that they made agreements with, those are going to be the winners. They're not giving any access to Amazon. They're not giving any access to Google. I don't know why they'd be giving access to Google, because Stadia is dead. The FTC is basically trying to get the judge to disregard all of these deals that are already out there. And the judge is trying to find out, how does it make sense? Because more people are going to have access to these games. More people are going to be able to play Call of Duty when this deal goes through. If this deal doesn't go through, they're not going to have that access because Bobby Kotick said he's not going to do it. And then the FTC argued, well, maybe he would do it for the right amount of money. Well, that's not what he said on stand. He didn't say that. And she asks again, why aren't cloud contracts positive for consumers? How is Microsoft giving NVIDIA content not a positive for consumers? The FTC said it would be, but we don't know. We don't have any evidence. Judge Corley says, that's why I'm saying in many ways you won, because you and the other regulators have forced them into deals. And the FTC says, I don't think we won because we have no evidence of these agreements and what they'll lead to. And that's a bunch of nonsense. These are big companies. They went on to say that, listen, Nvidia is $1 trillion company. You think they don't know how to do business? The judge said it's Nintendo. This is not a small company. Nintendo knows what they're doing. And if they signed this deal, it's going to be good for their platform. They signed it. So please explain to me how this is not good for the consumers. And the FTC was struggling. It was pitiful. The judge went even on to say that Call of Duty is not the most important title on the PlayStation, that God of War is, and some of these other titles. She also pointed out that Sony has a lot of exclusive titles on their platform. This is not looking good for the FTC. She was kind of scolding them, asking them if we'd still be here if there was a deal signed for Call of Duty. And they couldn't answer that. But this is all about Call of Duty. So if they had a signed deal, we wouldn't be here. And you can't answer that question. You lost a lot of credibility with the judge, in my opinion, after saying that. So that's pretty much it. That ends the day of testimony. That ends both sides' closing arguments. And I have to say that the FTC, they did not prove their case. Now we're just going to go over to Florian's site over here a little bit, and we're going to take a look at some of the things that he wrote. So the judge said we wouldn't be here if Microsoft had created Call of Duty, and that's why they're purchasing it. And she said there's nothing wrong with Microsoft purchasing it. She says Bobby Kotick, he started from nothing. He started from nowhere, and he made Call of Duty. So to suggest somebody else can't make a game like that is just not plausible. She said, shouldn't it make people want to be more competitive and go out there and make a game like this? You know, Microsoft talked about Final Fantasy exclusivity and how they did it right now. And this doesn't bode well for Sony because they just released a game that is a partial foreclosure from Xbox. And they're talking about Microsoft foreclosing or partial foreclosure of Call of Duty on their platform, when Microsoft has already offered them a contract. That's the most important part. That Phil Spencer said it under oath. That Satya Nadella said it under oath. And the judge clarified that Satya Nadella can't make that decision. It's Phil Spencer. But Phil Spencer also said it under oath. And for the FTC to suggest that Phil Spencer is going to come all the way out here and lie, and that Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, is going to lie on the stand in front of the judge and say that we're going to put Call of Duty on the PlayStation and then not put it on there is ridiculous. And we know this is ridiculous because we've seen the emails from Jim Ryan. He wasn't worried about this. We know what this is about. This is about competition. This is about Sony not wanting Microsoft to compete. This is about the FTC's incompetence. They should have never taken this case. They should have did a better analysis of the market. And then they would have seen that Sony is the market leader, and all the things that Sony is accusing Microsoft of doing, they are currently doing it. Make it make sense. The FTC, they're not going to win this preliminary injunction. They're not. And the judge kind of alluded to earlier in the trial that they can continue to sue Microsoft if they are denied here, which they can. But at that point, the deal would have been closed. It'll be final, and there's nothing they can do. Maybe if they win, they can fine them. But apart from that, they can't stop the deal. And when you look at the merits of this case, if you look at all the evidence, you can see that the FTC has nothing to stand on. They have no evidence. They can't even say how they came up with that 20%, which is very important. The judge pointed that out because she said if it's 15%, it's a lot different than 20% because 15%, they don't have any type of incentive. So show me how you got to that 20%. And they couldn't produce that document. They couldn't make it make sense. It's hilarious. Their performance was horrible. I wish you all could have heard it. And go on my Twitter feed because I was responding in real time. I can't remember everything that was said because a lot was said. And I'm sure that I'm missing a lot of things right now. It was an epic day of testimony. It was an epic closing for both sides. And afterwards, the judge congratulated both sides, said they were both professional. But I gotta be honest with you, the FTC, they did poorly. You could see the inexperience. I don't know if he was inexperienced. I don't know. But it appeared so. He was frazzled. He was stumbling. He couldn't answer the judge's questions. The judge asks you a direct question, you answer it. You're not a witness, trying to evade a question, trying to win your case. This is the judge. And if she asks you a question, you better answer it. And if you want to win your case, you better have that answer. And when you don't have an answer for the judge's simple question, which is key to your case, then you've lost. And I just can't see the FTC winning this case. They made some arguments on the cloud, but the cloud market doesn't exist. We don't know what's going to happen with it. It's an emerging market. It could be big, but nobody knows. So you have to let it grow in order for it to be something. You can't just say, oh, it's going to grow too big, so you can't do this, you can't do that. Nobody knows. So if that was the case, nobody would ever try, and you'd never have competition. You would never have new growth. It makes no sense from a business aspect. And I'm going to be honest with you guys, I'm extremely tired. It was really tough keeping up with everything today. That's pretty much it for me, guys, man. I'm burnt out. It was a long case. I have on the page right now, you can see some of Florian Muller's comments. You can follow him on Twitter. I'll leave the link in the description down below. The Verge had excellent coverage, so make sure you follow them. Now, I want to know what you guys think about all of this. Do you think that the FTC proved their case? Do you think their evidence was enough? Or do you think that the FTC lost and Microsoft won in a landslide? We're going to know pretty soon. I would say as early as Tuesday, we're going to know. I know some people say, oh, we're going to know by Friday. No, the judge is going to go through all the information. She's going to be thorough about this. She doesn't want an appeal. No judge wants an appeal on their case. So she's going to make sure that she goes through everything and makes the right decision. And based on everything that we saw today and all the questions that the judge was asking and how the FTC couldn't answer certain questions and how sharp Microsoft's team was, I just don't see it going the FTC's way, and I think that Microsoft is going to win, and we'll find out as early as next week. Thank you for checking me out. Hit the like button, share this out, subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys on the next one.